Chapter 6, Part 2, Books of Law. We have seen that the concept of God's universal command provided a basis for uniting religiously and culturally diverse Muslim empires. But the concept of law must be complemented by actual laws, and it was the development of a vast, diverse system of such laws that made Islamic civilization possible. The development of Islamic laws began when the Prophet Muhammad was asked to give specific guidance when his followers faced difficult problems. His sayings became the first articulation of Sharia outside the Qur'an. Given the intimacy of his revelation and submission to God's command, the Prophet's legal rulings were equal to the laws found in the Qur'an, at least for Muslims, even if they were of human origin. After Muhammad's death, his successors also gave legal rulings, and these were regarded as almost equally authoritative with those of Muhammad, given that his successors also had an intimate, long knowledge of the Prophet and the Qur'an. Still, the rulings of the early caliphs were far from sufficient for a rapidly growing empire. And so a group of learned and pious men, the Muslim jurists, emerged as people sought guidance on how to live according to God's command. The rulings of members of this group, usually called the ulama, would become a third authoritative source of guidance for Muslims. So we have the Qur'an, Muhammad's first successors, and the ulama providing the laws that will guide Muslims. And it is these laws that are gathered into the books of law, or fiqh, that give substance to the divine command. Of course, the jurists would need to develop a methodology for legal reasoning that ensured against individual caprice and allowed the wide community of jurists to understand one another's logic. And so the jurists agreed that the basic sources of legal guidance were the Qur'an, the sayings of the Prophet. These sources could then be extended through analogical reasoning and could be tested against the consensus of recognized legal scholars. This method created a measure of flexibility. Since different jurists came from different regional and international centers and cultures, they could make individual rulings appropriate to their contexts. Legal rulings did not need to be identical, so long as they arose from the same process or methodology and were consistent with the same principles. Yet for all their flexibility, there was a limit to how far the jurists could go in creating new laws. There were relatively few direct Quranic injunctions, and the sayings of the Prophet were limited. At some point, analogical reasoning and achieving consensus would bound to limit new legal rulings. So by the 3rd century after Muhammad, the consensus of the jurists was that they had discovered all the laws that could legitimately be regarded as Sharia, as part of God's command. And from that point onward, formulating new laws was going to be regarded as heresy. Muslim rulers could create laws necessary to govern, but moral and ritual lawmaking came to an end. This had two effects. Positively, it gave Muslims an enormous sense of moral certainty and assurance. They knew God's rules, even if they didn't follow them. Second, it placed in the hands of rulers greater and greater power, because only they, and not the jurists, could create the new laws necessary as Islamic civilization expanded into unknown territory and cultures. Muslims today, conscious that Sharia creates civilization, are also conscious that the classic books of law are no longer enough, particularly with the end of the last Muslim caliphate. In order for a contemporary Islamic civilization to emerge, more and more Muslims are calling for reopening the possibility of fresh legal reasoning, ijtihad. This alone will allow the renewal of Muslim life and civilization. In an era when those who claim to rule in the name of Islam are largely lawless, and the laws of the West are regarded as largely godless, Muslims are looking again to Sharia in new manifestations to provide a civilizational center for Islam and Muslim life. Thank you.